Welcome. I'm Renee from the Leap Network, and I am welcoming you to the next video in the weekly Leap series. So, last video, I talked about the fear of change, and today I want to talk about the fear of the unknown because a lot of times the fear of change is because what you're facing is unknown to you, and it can be very intimidating. So, I wanted to talk about that. You may be moving to a different country or to a different city within the same country, or you may be changing jobs, or you may be starting off on a new business or a new venture. So it's easy to be afraid of that because deep down you're really wanting to know, will I be okay? And sometimes that can be really intimidating because it is unknown. So you do have that fear. Um, I wanted to give you some tips today, and this is based on my own experiences. Some of you may not know that I actually lived on a sailboat for 7 years on a 45-foot sailboat. And I took a 2-year journey to cross the Indian Ocean from Singapore to Kenya. And that was pretty scary at first because, again, I had never crossed an ocean before. I had gone sailing, had going from port to port to port, and was always in view of land. But this time we were setting off across an ocean, and there were times, a lot of times, when we weren't going to see any land, and that was pretty frightening for me. So I want to give you 4 tips that I learned from that experience, and then that whole experience also helped me become a risk taker and be an entrepreneur. So it really bode me well. So the first tip is to break the big change into smaller chunks because each chunk is much less intimidating than the big change. So let's say you want to go from point A to point D. So break it down into point A to point B to point C to point D. And then plan for each one of those destinations. And when you break it down into those smaller chunks, it's much easier, less intimidating. And just ask yourself, where do I want to be after that one particular chunk? And then you can set your plan for that. And then the second tip is plan, plan, and plan. The 5 P's: poor planning prevents, or proper planning prevents poor performance. So again, for each one of those chunks, plan, and just plan as much detail as you possibly can, but also allow for some flexibility because there's always going to be changes and things are not always going to go as you expected. So my third tip is um, always have a plan B or even a plan C because you do need that flexibility. When things do go wrong, you're going to want to have already thought it through. What's going to possibly go wrong, and how am I going to make the change in my plan to accommodate what has happened? And remember, flexibility is really critical in life because nothing ever goes to plan exactly the way you want it. So you've already thought ahead, and it makes it much easier to enjoy the whole journey. And then finally, my fourth tip for you is something that my mother taught me at a very early age, and that is to think, don't panic. Now, this has helped me so many times, not only as a child, but during that whole sailing trip. There's the very first time that we went for blue ocean sailing where we weren't going to see any land. We had a situation where I was on wheel duty, and I was up, and it was two, and I think this I was somewhere between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. in the morning. My husband was down below sleeping, and it was my turn to be on deck and making sure that everything was going okay. The autopilot was working, but yet the boat wasn't going in the direction that we had set it to go. So I was wondering what was going on. I turned off the autopilot and started trying to manual steer, and still the boat wasn't going the way we wanted it to go. So actually I had to wake my husband up. And he said, well, okay, let's try turning on the engine and see if that helps. That didn't help either. So we were kind of in a situation where we're like, okay, what's happened with the rudder? So my husband decided that he was going to go overboard and check out the rudder. So as he was putting on all his scuba gear, it's pitch dark out there, and all I could think of was boom, 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 boom. boom, boom. So the Jaws theme and the fin in the water kept coming across in my mind. So I was like, wait a minute, think, don't panic. And I had remembered that a few days earlier, my husband had repacked the steering gland. So I was like, let's check that again to make sure that the coupling hasn't come loose. So we undid the bed that the steering mechanism was below, and sure enough, that one just coupling had come loose, and so the rudder was actually wobbling. So as soon as we tightened that back up, we were able to be on our way again, and so the think and don't panic really helped me a lot. So I hope these 4 tips really help you face change and know that you will be okay. Just remember to break it down into smaller chunks, plan each chunk, and then have a plan B or a plan C, and then think and don't panic, okay? So remember that change is an opportunity for personal growth, and that a mistake is never really a mistake if you learn from it, and failure doesn't happen if you get back up after the fall. So life is a journey, and till the next time, no excuses. Take the leap and live your best life. I hope you've enjoyed this the weekly leap, and I will see you next time. Have a great day and the rest of the week. Bye.